Hey everybody, we are still in chapter 7, and what we're taking a look at is section 7.4, which is to find the percent of a number mentally. And it is kind of odd to do a video about how to do something mentally, especially because I'm going to be writing and not doing it mentally. But even though that's a little bit odd, I will be talking about how things that you can do in your mind, and we'll be writing down some stuff, but what we'll be really looking at is shortcuts to finding the proportion or to finding the percentage of a number. So the first thing I'd like to have you guys take a look at is some information to know. Most of the stuff over here, you guys know. You know that 25% is 1/4, 50% is a half, 75% is 3/4, and 100% is 1 whole or 1/1. These guys you might also be familiar with. Definitely you know this. 20% is 1/5 or 2/10 if you think about it. 40% is 2/5 or 4/10, right, which reduces down to 2/5. 60% similarly 6/10, which is 3/5, and 80% 8/10, which is 4/5. These guys are straightforward enough. When you have 10%, it's 1 out of 10, 30%, 3 out of 10. These guys over here are not so straightforward. Maybe you remember that 33% is a third and 66% would be 2/3. But my guess is that most of these are not things that you know offhand. I would like you to copy the whole chart down and specifically make an effort to memorize this. Yes, I'm asking you to memorize. So I need you to have this down. I think it'll be helpful in life in general, but I also think that it will be helpful specifically in this section and working through problems very quickly. All right, so now that you've got your task ready, let's move on to an example. Example 1, we're going to use fractions to compute mentally. So again, like I told you, it's kind of weird because I'm not going to actually use mental math, because otherwise I'd just be popping up with the answer. I'm going to show you what fraction to use. So 75%, if you remember from the last page, is 3/4 or 3/4. If I am going to figure out what 75% of 24 is, I'm figuring out what 3/4 of 24 is. And when we see this, when we hear 3/4 of 24, we know that that means to multiply. So we're going to multiply straight through. I can cross cancel, and that gives me a 6 here. 3 times 6 is 18. And yes, the expectation is that you can do that in your head. So 18 is 75% of 24. Let's take a look at this one. Here we remember that 80%, hopefully that 80% is 4/5. If you've forgotten, you can do 8/10, that's okay. And then we're going to multiply by 60. Again, we've got a cross-canceling situation, and 5 goes into 60, 12 times. 4 times 12 is 48. So 48 is 80% of 60. Let's try this next one. 40% can be written as 2/5. We're going to multiply that by 50, cross cancel, and I get 20. So 20 is 40% of 50. All right. Hopefully that wasn't too bad, and you really could see yourself doing that mentally. So realize what was the key there? To remember that there are fractional relationships with a lot of percentages, and also remember that we have the skill to simplify multiplying by a fraction with cross-canceling. Let's take a look at this next example. Example 2, we're going to use decimals to compute mentally, and this is probably a way that I think about when I'm like out on the street and I have to calculate something really fast. This is the way I'd probably do it mentally. 10% of anything is really dividing by 10, right? So just thought bubble real quick before we kind of get into these problems. When I think about 10%, I know that that's 10 out of 100, and we saw that 10% is really 1/10. So multiplying by 1/10 or 1/10 is to multiply by, let me write it nicely, 0.1, right? Because these are equivalent. So now I'm looking at this as a decimal. This gets super easy because 76 times 0.1 or anything times 0.1 means move that decimal place over once to the left. So to compute this mentally takes no time at all. I'm multiplying 76 times 0.1, which really means move the decimal place over one space to the left, and I get 7.6. So 10% of 76 is 7.6. This is really super helpful when you are out to a restaurant and you need to think about what percentage tip you're going to give. If you want to give a 10% tip, pretty easy. If you want to give a 20% tip, you just double the amount you get from your 10% tip. If you were doing calculating for a 10% tip. Okay, 1% is very similarly just as easy. 1% is 1 out of 100, which is 100th, which is to multiply by 0.01, which really means to move the decimal place over 2 spaces to the left. So my answer here is 1.22 because I'm multiplying 122 times 0.01, and I get that. Finally, again, another opportunity to use our 10%. Boom. Done, right? That's what you've done. Move the decimal place over 1 space to the left. All right, we have one last problem, example 3. We're going to compute mentally. You are shopping for clothes at Kohl's. You have a coupon that will save you 20% on your entire purchases for that day. If your cost before discount is $150, how much will you save with your coupon? So we're not asking for the sale price, how much you're going to pay. We're asking how much you're going to save. So we're really asking what is the 20% amount. And this is pretty straightforward. First, let's find 10% of $150, and that's going to be 15 bucks, right? 10% of $115 is $15. Now 20% of $150, sorry for writing all scribbly, of $150 has to be double that. Since this is doubled, that's going to be doubled, and it's $30. So you will save $30 on your purchases at Kohl's. So that's how much you'll save. All right. I hope that made sense. I know that to do things mentally is sometimes, it's hard for me to measure if you've done it mentally, but give it a try. This is really helpful just to have this knowledge in life in general, and it'll be really helpful to speed through some of the problems in the exercises. Have an excellent day. I look forward to talking to you guys soon.